we're talking about the team longevity of people sticking with the company, sticking with the project. Because if you are burning out, you end up leaving, you end up switching teams, switching companies. But if you're working on that kind of productivity where you're not burning out, teams will be happier and they will maintain their energy levels to keep working on the next project and the next and the next, all the while being more productive.
Hello and welcome to Center for Victory's podcast of Your Best Day Yet. At Center for Victory, we're here to help unlock, reinforce, and enrich relationships through personal and professional development. I'm Eric Guy, Chief Victory Officer here at the Center for Victory. Our guest today, Dalmo Cirne, and I pronounced that correctly. Dalmo's the author of Four Streams of Leadership. We're going to unpack all this. So this is going to be an interesting one. I figure that he has a very interesting story, but he's a technologist, mathematician, and leader. He's throughout his career, he's been incredibly lucky to be part of extraordinary companies surrounded by amazing people, and together they built high quality, high value products. So, welcome, Dalmo. Appreciate you being on the podcast.
Hey, Eric, it's great to be here. Really excited to be on the show and for us to have this conversation.
Should I just open it up with the accent because we were joking before we got on here? You're in Boulder, Colorado, uh,
Indeed.
but in your but you do have a little bit of an accent. I don't think that is from a Coloradian accent. So why don't you give us the background of what brought you like have some fun with it, but also we do want to know how you got to where you're at and what makes you an expert in leadership.
Yeah, no, the accent is something I have been explaining my whole life. Hey, I'm American. I just speak with an accent. I wanted to hit you back with a question and asking you,
Yeah.
how many people do you think are prepared to step into a position of leadership?
Wow, that's a great question. Prepared, very, very slim. I would say probably depending on the company, ugh, 10, 15% maybe.
Yeah, I don't have an exact number on percentage, but as you said, we can imagine there is a very low number, right? Not
Mhm.
many people are ready when they find themselves in a position of management and leadership, and they start struggling. It's like, what do I do, or am I supposed to do, right? It's so common that in 1969, Lawrence Peter, he wrote the famous book, the Peter Principle, right? And I'm oversimplifying over here, but in his book, he argues that you get promoted to your level of incompetence. And I wanted to change that. I don't think that you spend your whole life being competent at your work and suddenly you get to a level where you become incompetent. I wanted to argue that you are unprepared, not that you are incompetent. And I wanted to come up with an equation to change that dynamics and say, hey, how about we get you prepared to step into this position rather than falling as the next victim of the Peter Principle?
Yeah, and you've worked for quite a few companies. I think what you worked for Disney.
Yes, I did. Mickey Mouse used to be my boss.
Yeah. And how was that? What did you learn there?
It was an absolutely amazing experience. Going a little back in time, when Steve Jobs sold Pixar to Disney, he became the single largest shareholder at Disney. And because he was also CEO at Apple, there was an intense collaboration between Disney and Apple. Luckily, I was caught in the middle of that collaboration, right? So I got to develop amazing products for the Disney company, collaborate directly with Apple, which gave me an exposure to amazing technologies, previews of prototypes of upcoming products. It it was amazing.
And you were saying that, one of the common challenges is not necessarily the incompetency, it's just lack of preparedness. Like, can you go into that a little bit?
Absolutely. Once you step in a position of leadership, the first thing that comes to mind is that what am I supposed to do? Right? You find yourself, I'm not prepared for this. I'm going to focus only on managing one aspect, like, oh, I'm going to manage my team, or I have technical expertise. I can just delegate to people and think that this is management. Uh, Now you start developing bitterness to your role as a manager. You are develop some strategies that are like overfit to a specific situation, but you're not really growing in that the position. But all of that is because what you're missing is the understanding of why you're doing this, what are you doing, how you're doing, and when you should do it. When is something that very few people talk about it. For example, if you are implementing processes at a company, let's imagine two stages of a company, early stage and a more mature state of a company. Early on, if you try to apply a lot of processes, things will not work well, right? You're going to stifle innovation. You're not going to be able to grow as fast as you would want. But then comes, why should you apply or institute a process to begin with? So a process is that kind of recipe that you put in place when you want to create reproducible results. Can you predictably create a product that the quality gets repeated over and over again? Right? That's the intent behind creating a process, is to be able to consistently, reliably reproduce results. But then you say, as the company starts growing, if you take too long to apply those processes and to create results in a reproducible, consistent way, now you're losing customers, you're upsetting people because quality starts taking a hit. So when is the right moment to apply those processes? So that's one of the many examples of why, how, when, and uh, what of leadership, right?
Well, let's talk about the book a little bit, The Four Streams of Leadership. Why, kind of tell us why you wrote it? Who is it for?
Absolutely. When I stepped into that position of leadership, that was back in 2013, I was struggling myself. How do you do this? Where can I find documentation? Where can I find a book about that? Where can I go to learn? And I noticed that a lot of books in this space, they are addressing the C-suite level of a company. And that's an overcrowded space. And it wasn't speaking to the professional I wanted to be. It's like, hey, yesterday I was an individual contributor. Today I am a manager. How do I bridge the gap?
Mm-hmm.
And that was not very well documented. So I started creating my own systems. I started applying my own theories and also learning from many that came before me and share their wisdom and put their words to paper. Then I came up with eventually the concepts of the four streams of leadership. And we're going to dive a little bit into each one of these streams, but I
Yeah.
wanted to describe who the book speaks to,
Okay.
right? Who would benefit the most from those books? And I have four audiences in mind. Those who are transitioned from being individual contributors into a role of management. Second, people who are in a role of management, but they are struggling. They're not really finding their bearings. They know they can do better, but they just need that blueprint to get them to take off. Third, leaders of leaders, right? Once you go one level above or two levels above, you want to get those leaders in your organization to perform better, to raise their performance, to um, be better. Last but not least, students. They want to go beyond academic coursework and they want to hit the ground running. Once they hit the market, they are prepared, they are ahead of the curve. Those were the initial four audiences I have in mind. And of course, there are those people who self-select, and everyone is welcome, right? But just to be a
Hmm.
focused conversation, those are the ones I had in mind. But you wanted to dive a little deeper
Yes.
into each of the streams, right?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, let's do this. I'm going to show you a diagram I prepared over here. For those at home who are not able to see what I'm showing Eric over here, is a diagram where in the center there is a box and it's showing managing yourself, right? In managing yourself, it is the first stream. You need to know what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, what do you consider to be core values, how to address those. And that's where everything else begins. The name streams came from in a leadership position, you always have a constant flow of activities coming your way. And is analogous to a perennial river, right? It's constantly flowing. Might as well call that a stream. So the second stream, showing again over here, it's called downstream. And it is split into three different areas. Downstream, you're managing your team, you're managing projects, and you're managing operations, the day-to-day operations of putting everything together. The third stream is when you're managing upstream. Upstream doesn't mean you're telling your boss or your manager what to do, but there are conversations that need to take place. Historically, those conversations tend to break down. Lack of confidence, lack of trust, you are shy, however, whichever the reason. But you need to be able to have a flow of communication going back and forth, especially because you need to provide your manager and their managers the right information to make the correct decision, right? If not for anything, that is one of the main reasons. Last but not least, managing side stream. You have product managers, you have legal team, you have sales team, you have marketing team, you have all those peers that need to collaborate with you to figure out how do I bring a new product to the market, a new feature, is it compliant with regulations? There is a plethora of things to be working on. Knowing all those four domains and what to do in each one of them, what are the expectations, will prepare you much, much better to be successful in that position of leadership.
Gotcha. And what makes that different? What do you think makes that different of focusing on those areas, those four streams?
That is an awesome question. And I know you want to know the answer. I'm going to tell you right now because you would ask, there are books out there in leadership and management, many claiming to be, hey, I can do this differently and so on. One thing you inevitably find in many of those books is they're filled with stories. And those stories, they are very compelling. They're attractive. You read them, you want to see and hear, understand how it ends. However, unless you have the same life experiences as the author, those stories are disconnected from reality. You can't connect the dots. You don't really learn what you wanted to apply those lessons to your particular use case. So those stories, they make you feel great. They're emotional. Create an attachment to them. But after you finish, they didn't leave you any better off. They are great, but they amount to nothing. You will never go back to read those stories again. and you're never going to be able to connect the dots and bring to your reality unless you have the same life experiences as the author. So when you write a book and you fill with those stories, might as well call it like an entertainment book or science fiction, whatever you want to call it. Instead, bringing practical knowledge with lessons that you can apply. Hey, this you can do today. You can translate those experiences, those examples in a book to your life today. That's where a lot of value is, not only explaining what it is, setting what the expectations are, but bringing those practical examples that you can use over and over again. It is a book to be not only a one read, but to have it at your arm's length to be reference material because you will be using that and referencing it over and over again throughout your career. I reference it myself.
Right. Um, when we look at those streams, right? You look at the first one, the reservoir, and so I'm going to preface this as saying, hey, look, like, can we give some examples of each one here so that people can really start to connect the dots? It's about managing oneself. I think that's pretty self-explanatory, but can you give us an example of that?
I prepared an example over here. If you are open to it, it's not of the reservoir because there are some more deeper aspect of understanding yourself,
Mm-hmm.
but something that listeners can apply today to their jobs.
Mm-hmm.
You want to do it?
Sure.
Let's do it. So I'm going to hold here a different diagram. And for those just listening to this, I want to describe this diagram. There are a few boxes over here, all connected to each other. It's a sequence of operations describing how a CPU, as the one inside of your computer, works, right? There is the RAM, that's the memory where as you run a program, things are. And you need to bring instructions from RAM to the CPU. And those instructions they get in a queue, usually called the L1 and L2 caches. Then the processor will fetch those instructions and they're going to start executing those instructions. As long as that cache is filled with instructions, the processor is going to go there and will say, instruction, execute, next instruction, execute, and we'll keep going. Then there's a thing called a cache miss. When you miss an instruction, which means that the execution path was wrong or not predicted correctly, you have to go to the RAM, bring new instructions, and that takes a long time, relatively speaking, to a processor on a computer. But how do we bring that to our day to day? Imagine that a person works on like 1.5 tasks per week, right? Then let's assume that there are like 40 solid weeks of work in a year. A year has 52 weeks, but you have vacation, holidays, time off. But let's, just for the sake of this discussion, 40 solid weeks of work in a year. That would make 1.5 times 40, 60 tasks per year, right? And one issue that happens is those tasks, they're not really ready to go. They are not well defined. Some details are missing, and they lack a definition of what does it mean for the work to be done, right? And people say, well, let's ask everyone on the team to work harder, to work faster, to work smarter. There are many jargons out there. What if we take a different approach? Instead of working harder, smarter, or whatever, what if we work on the backlog of all those tasks and we prepare those tasks with enough information for them to be ready to go? Once they are ready to go, a an engineer or a person will go there, see the task in the backlog, grab them, and we'll have all the information to execute and complete that task. You can easily see, let's say, being very conservative, a 10% gain in productivity, which would mean from 60 to 66 tasks per year per
Hmm.
person. And you didn't have to ask the person to work any harder or smarter or longer. So if you are a startup company, that gain in productivity can mean that you won the race for survival. You found product market fit. You came up with a better product. And if you are in a large company, that could mean that, hey, you're getting better assignments. You are being assigned to work on better projects. Because you're doing such a great job, maybe you are appointed for a promotion, right? There are many things that can come from those gains in productivity. And there's a bigger benefit for the team itself.
Mark Twain said the two most important days of your life are the day you're born and the day you find out why. Welcome to Vision Day.
We're talking about the team longevity of people sticking with the company, sticking with the project. Because if you are burning out, you end up leaving, you end up switching teams, switching companies, quiet quitting. There are all kinds of problems you may be dealing with. But if you're working on that kind of productivity where you're not burning out, teams will be happier and they will maintain their energy levels to keep working on the next project and the next and the next, all the while being more productive, right? And this is just by optimizing the pipeline and defining how tasks should be better executed and complete, right?
Hmm.
You can, of course, it's not perfect. There will be cases where a task does need more information and so on, but we can try to optimize. We can try to do our best to groom the backlog and prepare those tasks to do. This is something that listeners can do today. They can start applying that lesson today. They don't have to wait. They say, I know what I have to do. Let me go to my backlog, work on those tasks, and make all of them, or as much as possible, ready to be picked up, pretty much being shovel ready.
And what about you said the downstream, that's where we spend most of our time. Did I hear you say that correctly?
Yes, you are absolutely right. Downstream is where you're going to be managing your teams, you're
Hmm.
going to be managing the project, and you're going to be managing the operations, right? It is natural to expect that in implementing a product, executing a task, you're going to be spending most of your time with your teams. You're going to be defining features for the project. What is priority? What is not? What needs to be done now? What are expectations, timelines? And you need to orchestrate the execution of all of that in form of operations. So expect to spend most of your time downstream, but don't confuse that with spending all of your time downstream, right? If you do that, you end up like neglecting upstream, side stream, and even yourself. And you do need to start with the reservoir. You do need to start with yourself um, to get things going.
Yeah, and you did mention just a little bit ago the upstream, and earlier you said it's not about telling what your senior management or your directors what to do. Um, it's about alignment. You said about alignment on the execution of the projects. I can't
Uh,
remember how you prefaced it, but
yes,
yeah, but rather than me putting words in your mouth, tell us what you meant by that, because that's interesting, and I think that is and why I bring it up is I think is a skill. Like if you want to be a good leader, like how do you support the leaders that you report to?
absolutely. Um, let's pick a case of project XYZ. The first thing we need to know is the project on track? How do we report about those projects? Do we have to write a status update? Is it a conversation about status update? But what do I even need to talk about? Be that in written format or just in a meeting or in spoken format, right? You want to write that status update or talk about the status update. What are the expectations that are there? How many people worked? What were the tasks that were developed? Are there any blockers over there? Do you need to escalate the situation saying, hey, this is happening. We don't have the resources we need. If you could intervene and bring that resource, the resource could be a new person, could be a new piece of equipment. There could be many other things as form of resource. But it also could be you are proposing a project. Let's say organically, the team collaborating with customers, hey, there is this new feature that we should implement, will benefit the customer tremendously. How do you find like even budget for that? How do you get permission to build that, right? You need to have that communication upstream to sell. We spoke with customers. Here's what needs to be built. Here's the priority. How do we make it happen? They will have different context when looking at that task. Maybe they already have that on their radar. Maybe they don't. Maybe they need to be aware of that so it can go on their radar. Now you see that because of that communication, if it was already on their radar, they may choose to bring it closer to priority zero, right? If it wasn't in their radar, they say, oh, this is really important. Let's put on the radar. Or they may even say, we consider that, even though customers are saying this, is not really how we're going to implement. I have a funny story. Imagine that we were to invent the dishwasher, and we sit down with a bunch of customers and ask, how would you love to have your dishes washed for you? This was before the dishwashing era, right? They would say, hey, you have this box with arms where you put on top of the sink, and on one side there's a pile of dirty dishes. The two robotic arms get the dish and wash one by one and put on the other side, right? You can imagine that people would see this after watching the Jetsons and
Yep.
whatnot. But we know that that's not how a dishwasher works. The dishwasher, you load all the plates at once, and there's jets of water, and it's a different principle. However, what they wanted was, I want clean dishes without having to wash them myself.
Right.
So in a conversation like that, you can share with your manager, we need to wash the dishes. You can propose the idea of arms, but they can say, hey, how about if you put a box and the trays? And you see how that communication could lead to a great new product.
Mm-hmm. And then real quick, go over the last one, right? Side stream.
Side stream. Let's start with a product manager. The relationship with a product manager must be a good one. There's no alternative to that. They are usually the head of product. They are those people who live in the future, but during business hours, they come to present day and they tell you, hey, here's the future we are going to build. It's great to work with them. They really are ahead of time and see things in the future. How do you prioritize the features you're going to be building? What challenges do you see? Having that relationship with the product manager and finding out how to build the features, how to plan. You have two knobs. You have a knob of scope and you have a knob of time. Usually it's a trade-off between the two. You increase the scope, you need to increase time. You don't have enough time, you try to cut on scope. Those relationships do happen with product people. There's also people on the legal team. Companies, they usually have promises or contract with customers. and you need to find out, oh, this product over here accesses all the data. And you can say, oh, not so fast. This feature can only access that kind of data in order to be compliant with contracts, with regulations, and whatnot. Those conversations, they must go through the legal team. They will find out, hey, here's what the product does, the features it accesses. If it needs to break a promise, for example, in a contract, you need to draft a new contract. You need to contact the customers and say, hey, this contract amendment supersedes the previous one. Do you agree with that or no? So you have to walk and work all those steps if you need to launch a feature. And if you must launch a feature that pretty much breaks an existing contract, right? There are ways of doing that, but it requires an amendment and it requires you working with the legal team to do that. So that kind of work with your peers is immensely important. You can't just go and release a product before people being aware and knowing that, hey, everyone just giving a thumbs up.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Before we get to our last question, Dalmo, where can people find you at and your book?
Absolutely. So I'm super passionate about helping people getting to a leadership position with confidence, being prepared that they are ready um, to be a leader. So I wanted to invite everyone to head to my website, which is dalmocirne.com, DALMOCIRNE.com. There you're going to find articles, resources, links to X and LinkedIn and Substack and all my socials. And you find a easy way to book a conversation with me or to send me an email, a direct message in the contacts page, right? And I reply to every single message. So if you have a question, send me a message, book an appointment with me. That is the best place to find me.
Good stuff. As we ask everybody, because the podcast is called Your Best Day Yet, how would you describe that for yourself?
That is a very easy question to answer, but it is not a professional one. My best day ever, it was the day my kids were born.
Right.
It's unrivaled. Seeing my
Yes.
kids born, I have twins, boy and girl. It was my best day. Yeah, the memories are ingrained in my brain.
Good
But I
stuff.
wanted to elaborate a little bit, take a tangent, not talk about my kids, but talk about nostalgia, right?
Okay.
There was even an article I wrote about nostalgia where when leaders are referring too often about the good old days, they may not notice, but they are implying that the future is not as bright, right? It is good to look back and celebrate those moments of success, but not without losing perspective of the future. If you have something to look forward to, tomorrow will be better than today, and today was better than yesterday. That said, yes, it is great to be able to make a retrospective, look back, celebrate those moments, those wins, those lessons that you've learned, but not to be stuck with that feeling of nostalgia because you may be mortgaging the future, right? You may be saying the future is not as bright, therefore, let's draw your attention to the past.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, let's end there. That was good. Appreciate you being on the show. If you want more information, folks, you can visit us at centerforvictory.com. And just remember, wherever you're at, whatever you're doing, make this your best day yet. We'll see you soon.